like I said on TikTok, I just wanted to be like an evil Miss Frizzle. But it also just is such like a cornerstone of culture. So I posted every day for like a week. And then on like the 7th day, I posted a reel where I went to sleep and I woke up with like 2.5 million views. And I was like, God.
Today I have on Daisy Foko. I am Dustin PolyInnovator. This is the PolyTools Creator Spotlight. She is a podcaster, gardener, actress, I believe, as well, and polymathic content creator. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show, Dustin.
It is so much fun to be able to see you here. I remember watching your content, like those late night deep dives into history and just kind of explaining characters. There was one particular video I saved for a long time, so I wanted to look up the character because I talk a lot about polymathic people. And it was some guy who I think died out of spite and in Greece or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember going deep into him.
Yeah, he was really cool because like his entire thing was that he was just super spiteful. Like if you think of like the phrase like stand on business, like that's him. And so he really did truly just choose to die out of spite. And it was the ultimate gotcha moment, honestly. I love stuff like that. Human beings are so funny.
Yeah. And I think even too, like there was a statue about him and someone got mad about it and the statue like crushed him because it was protesting that guy.
Yeah, that was the greatest Olympian of all time. He was like a wrestler. He was really, really, really good. And he created this sort of impossible standard for all the athletes that followed for a while. So it was like a scorned athlete. It was like, I hate you, like you've ruined the sport. And then he got crushed by him, which is incredible. Fate.
And that's just a prime example of just so many different stories you shared as a creator. I mean, I followed you on TikTok first, but then I followed you everywhere else. And now you even have your own podcast too, where you get to talk to creators and share more stories. And it's just interesting to kind of delve into this world. This whole show is talking about modern creators and their journey. The way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, that no one knows? That's so hard because I stay yapping. Okay. Let me think about this. Okay. Actually, I do have a really sort of adorable childhood story that I feel like the internet would like, but I've just never talked about it. My parents like love this story. But in kindergarten, our classrooms were each themed after a different animal, and my classroom is like the bear theme. The one next door was the crows, which is actually like much cooler. Though when I was 5, I thought that was way less cool. But now that I'm an adult, I'm like, that's way cooler. But anyway, we had like parent teacher day where all the parents were supposed to come in. So we were all supposed to color this like outline of these 3-foot tall bears, and everybody colored theirs brown or black because like, you know, that's what colors bears are. But I had like this hang up on like rainbows at the time where like whenever, you know, you're 5, people are like, what's your favorite color? And I was like, rainbow. And they were like, that's not a color, it's a spectrum. And I was like, to me, it's a color because I would feel bad picking one. And so I colored my bear rainbow. And all the kids the whole day were giving me shit about it, where they're like, Daisy, that's not what a bear looks like. And I was like, why not? Like, it's a fake bear. It isn't a real bear. Like, it can be whatever I want. We have like 25 crayons out here. Like, they're not all just brown and black. Anyway, every single parent who came in at the end of the day, it was actually like the most validating experience of my young life. Because every parent who came in, they had the bears hanging from the ceiling over all the desks. As kids, we were just like lined up in the back of the room. Each parent that came in looked at the one rainbow bear in a sea of like brown and black bears, and they were like, that's my kid's bear. I know it. I know that's my kid's bear. And they were all wrong until my parents came in and they looked at each other and they're like, that's actually my kid's bear. And it is like my parents' favorite moment of my childhood.
That is fantastic. If I ever make a video game, I need to have a rainbow bear in it.
You do. You really do.
I name it Daisy.
I would love that.
Yeah. I love that question too, because like everybody answers it differently. Some people kind of give a cop-out answer. Most people find something that they might say into very little people. You found something deep there. I appreciate that. It's so fun.
Anytime. You know, I try my best.
every question after that too kind of makes it easier. I think I stole that one from basically like a famous podcaster from like 10 years ago, and I was like, I want to have that as like an icebreaker. It's something nice.
That's
Steal from the
cool.
greats.
You watch like Joe Rogan or something, and you're like, that's it. I've actually never seen a whole like I've never watched Joe Rogan. I just see the clips online, but I know people like love it. Yeah, I know people love it. I've had some friends go on it.
I don't have the patience to be sitting there for 3 hours.
It's 3 hours?
So, I mean, so Joe Rogan goes as long as he needs to for anybody. It could be as little as an hour. Sometimes I think his longest was like 4 hours or something like that.
Whoa.
And I'm kind of the same way. Like I go with basically as long as you want to go, as long as we don't have like a hard stop for the most part. I think my longest interview was like 2 hours, 10 minutes. And on the other show, this show is a bit shorter than the other one anyways. But either one, I basically go as long as you feel ready, because generally you're sharing something that's interesting. You're sharing something that could help somebody. And I figure like I never really cut anything out. So if we go for 2 hours, it's probably for a reason.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. Right off the bat, what got you started as a content creator?
Dude, speaking of people doing things out of spite, like I started it out of spite because my best friend Tiva was harassing me for months. Like she was into Musical.ly, so TikTok had been like newly minted in TikTok. Like that merger had just happened. And it was back when like the world was still regarding TikTok as like weird weeb app, you know, and like nothing else, like the videos only, you know. And she was like, dude, you've got to get on TikTok. And I was like, dude, I'm not getting on TikTok. All right. I don't want to be on there. Like I was like a classic, like
cool.
Yeah, I was classic, like TikTok's freaking lame, and then now everyone and their mother's on TikTok, and I'm on TikTok chronically. But she was harassing me so much, and she was like, wouldn't leave me alone about it. And she can be like very insistent. So it truly was like every 5 minutes, every time I talked to her, and I talked to her like several hours out of every day. So it was a lot. And eventually I was like, all right, like what do I have to do to get you to leave me alone about like this TikTok thing? And she was like, if you get on TikTok and you post a video every single day for a week, I'll leave you alone. And I was like, all right, fine. I will do that for you. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to see that this is not even something that I would like. And she was like, I think you're going to blow up on there. And I was like, whatever. So I posted every day for like a week. And then on like the 7th day, I posted a reel where I went to sleep and I woke up with like 2.5 million views. And I was like, God damn it. I was like, no, like I was shocked. And I was also like, I called her and I was like, you're right. Like, they liked me on TikTok. And she was like, oh, I saw. Yeah, I saw. Yeah. And I've just been on there chronically for like years.
Jeez. And it's funny too, because I've been on there since 2018, since it was Musical.ly, and I've seen that whole growth. And I've seen, like, you know, Call Me Chris. I saw her when she was less than like 8,000 people, followers. And then I saw her blow up to 10 million. And like in my head, I want to be like a little bit envious about it, but like I know that people work harder than me. I know people are more creative than me, and it's okay. Like there's no point to be envious. But that's honestly like after a week, girl. After
a week, and I was just doing random story times and like Avatar: The Last Airbender like skits and stuff, and like it just was a random story about like me driving and getting out of a speeding ticket in Texas, and it went like super viral. And I worked at a car dealership at the time too, so I was like so stressed out that like I was gonna get fired. Where I was like, oh my God, I was just like going into my cubicle every day and being like, or throughout the day and looking and be like, oh my God, it's still going. I hope my boss doesn't see this and fire me, thinking I was driving one of our cars. This happened like years ago. And I was like planning what I was going to say. He wasn't on TikTok. He's like 50, you know, it never ever came up at any point, but I was stressed out about it.
Fair enough. I mean, I would be too. And it's interesting to think about how short form creators really blow up on TikTok, because it's kind of the whole premise of TikTok, being able to go viral like that. There's not much other benefit to it, I feel like, because as you know, there's not much cross section going over to other platforms. There is a little bit more now. I think you even talked to MatPat about that as well. It's just interesting to think about TikTok itself. The monetization wasn't really that great from what I've been told, but the actual growth aspect is really cool. Yeah,
TikTok is like, in terms of like what each app brings of value, like YouTube definitely brings like quality control, I would say. Not in shorts, that's like that's the final frontier. But you know, in terms of like the long form content, like it's got really high level cinematic works all the way down to just like people just live streaming, you know? So like there's a huge broad spectrum really high quality stuff on there if you want it. TikTok has some really high quality stuff too, but like that's not what the value in it is. The value is just the reach in TikTok is so algorithmically impressive and interesting. And then Instagram, I think is, I know people say it's dying, and it kind of is, but I think the value in Instagram is people mainly follow on Instagram when they care about like what the individual is doing on a day-to-day basis, whether or not they're actually like a lifestyle person. It's more of a catch-all.
Yeah, I definitely think Instagram, like people say it's dying, but I think it's going to stick around. Like I'm more worried about Facebook or even LinkedIn, even though LinkedIn's blowing up right now when it comes to longevity, just because I think LinkedIn's trying too many different things and not sticking to it. YouTube's really interesting, and I like how you mentioned shorts and reels and TikTok. It's like they're all different, but they're all kind of the same content at the same time. Just kind of TikTok is the first, then reels, then shorts. It kind of funnels down.
Yeah, it's interesting because different stuff is received vastly differently per platform, even if you have like very similar demographics that follow you. Because like for me, like the biggest, most notable demographic difference is like it's all the same age groups, although Instagram is slightly older, like literally 2 years older. So like very slightly older. And then I have 51% male followers on Instagram, whereas TikTok, I'm 63% female. So it's like a little bit of a gender swap. But other than that, like ages, locations, all of that is very similar. And yet the way the same video will be received is like hugely different. There's things that won't go viral on TikTok at all, and then they'll get like 9 million views on Instagram. It's so strange.
It's also really interesting to think about too. Like you said, different demographics. I would take my interviews and chop them up and post them to all the different platforms, including Pinterest too. Ironically, Pinterest did better than all the other three combined, which is kind of insane.
Pinterest is a sleep gradient of content reach, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
Especially for like videos, because like people don't realize you can post like vertical videos like that on there, and it's like that's a huge deal. And I cross post all my Instagram images over there too, just for automation. So
yeah, that's the way to do it.
I was just gonna say, oh, sorry.
That's all. I was just agreeing with you.
I was just gonna say, like, I noticed that Instagram did not receive well to my content at all. Like, I actually lost a few followers because I posted too many reels. But then, like, TikTok, you know, it liked it. It just was still kind of being slow and stuck at the 200s or stuck into a couple thousand, something like that range. And then, like, YouTube actually did pretty well, and then Pinterest did really well. And so it's just really interesting, depending on your content, depending on how much you're posting. Like, each platform just does so differently.
Yeah, it is so differently. And I will say, like, on TikTok, I think I'm probably in a little bit of an echo chamber on TikTok, and like I'm aware of that. I'm very responsive in the comments. I think because of that, my audience is a lot nicer to me, because it's harder to forget that I'm like a person on the other side of it when I'm responding to everything so much, you know, which is like, it's not like I'm selfishly doing that. I just genuinely, like, I see the comments and I'm like, this person took time to talk to me. I should respond. Yeah. And it's decimated my work-life balance, honestly, but I don't like ignoring it, because some people will say such interesting, nice things. And so I want to be like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, but Instagram though, I'm just now starting to get more responsive in the comments, because like, man, they were mean to me over there. They're so aggressive. Oh, they're so tough.
It's weird too, because I think a lot of creators, they get a little too big for their britches and they don't check the comments anymore. And so I'm glad that you still do, despite the fact you're growing quite a bit. And I respect that you have that tenacity to still do it. I remember early on in my journey watching Gary Vee, and he talked about that. Like, even when you're getting into like a medium or a bigger size, he still checked the comments for a long time, even when he's like 100,000 YouTube subscribers or more. And it's like, yes, it takes a lot of time, but that personal connection can make a big difference. I mean, you're here right now because you checked my comment and saw it, right?
Yes.
So like, that's because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's a lot nicer, you know, like I don't really think of people who like follow my account as like fans of me. Like, you know, it's just, they happen to be following me. And so I think having that mindset is important, because I think that's where you see people sort of lose it online, is they think that they have like a cult mentality surrounding them, when it's like, it's not really that. It's just that people appreciate the value you're bringing to their timeline. And that's pretty much like the end and the beginning of it for most people. Like, you might have a few people who are really, you know, like emphatic, and like that's awesome, and they bring their own value to the community and stuff. But it really is more like you're the catalyst for a community of people who just like the same kind of stuff than it is that people are like obsessed with you, you know? Like at least that's the way I think of it.
I definitely like the word catalyst for that as well. I was going to mention too the idea of like these different communities on TikTok, because like, are you been on Reddit much at all?
Yeah, I'm all up in Reddit.
Okay, I thought you might be, but I didn't want to assume. Considering how much research you do, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I would throw away on Reddit just because I don't want people to see me lurking on like because the problem is I go down like the drama rabbit holes on Reddit of like the toxic like in-laws and stuff, and I don't want people to see that and think I'm having like issues, you know, and like read into it. Really, I'm just here for like the tea, you know, like nothing's happening to me.
Just for the drama.
Yeah.
We can go down a whole rabbit hole, just Reddit content, like videos and whatnot. But I was bringing it up because all these subreddits are how they organize all the information on there. And I find that TikTok has a similar, like, the sub-communities kind of thing. But unlike Reddit, where you can kind of choose to join which ones, TikTok automatically sorts you into it. So I'm not sure you had a similar experience of that. I'm just curious what you thought about that, because like, it's more like the information architecture of all these different topics.
Yeah, no, that definitely has been my experience on TikTok. It's so interesting because from user to user, the experience of like the For You page is so vastly different. And I really feel that it's like on another level from most other platforms. Like even if you don't watch someone like Curtis Connor on YouTube, everyone has like a sort of like vague sense of who that is purely because of how many subscribers he has, or like an iNabber, you know, something like that. Whereas TikTok, every once in a while, I'll see somebody who has 56 million followers, and I will have no concept of who that person is at all. And I'm like, clearly 56 million plus people, because these are just the people who press the following button. So there's at least like 100 million people have like a knowledge of who this person is, and like I'm not one of them. That's crazy. Like that, you don't really see that on like anything else. If you see like 100 million followers on Instagram, it's a celebrity, you know, like it's someone people generally know.
It's crazy too, because again, like people grow so fast, but it's so big of a platform that people don't realize. I remember when it changed from Musical.ly to TikTok, and just the vibe was different. It was still fun. It was still kind of like, you know, Weave Central. I love the way you described that. But it was like, it was so weird how like immediately I started getting a whole bunch of Bollywood stuff, which was like, I like Bollywood, so that's cool. But like, it was weird how I started
like getting Bollywood too.
Like, yeah. But like immediately, as soon as I switched over, tons of Bollywood stuff, tons of Chinese stuff, tons of even like European stuff. Whereas before, it was mainly just the US stuff that I saw.
It was a lot less
obviously,
global.
That has to do with the different regions. Yeah. And it was really interesting seeing that shift. And I remember seeing all these different trends. And someone said recently on this exact show where it's like, if you're not on these platforms, particularly TikTok, but if you're not on these platforms, at least like an hour a day or like a couple hours a week at the very least, like you lose out on just what the meta is and the trends.
Yeah, you really lose out on just the cultural exchange is the thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's also like when it comes to like having kids on TikTok, like just as a viewer, not as like content creators, because like I have strong opinions about that, but like just as a viewer, I think that's why a lot of parents are feeling like a super strong sense of conflict of like, when should I let my kid get on this freaking app? Because like it's addicting and it has like all of these like potential problems and dangers, just like any other part of the internet. But it also just is such like a cornerstone of culture that you don't want your kid to be socially isolated. So, I mean, I don't have kids, so like I'm glad I don't even have to think about that yet, just because that seems like so stressful to navigate.
When I know on the Days at Night podcast, you were talking to Matt Pat about that and how he takes care of his kids online and gives them like an hour a day or something like that. And he treats like Netflix and YouTube basically as the same, like 1 hour screen time each. And that's a unique way of doing it. I feel like I had another guest on the Polycast, my other show, Junaid Ahmed. He talks about his kids, and he actually encourages kids to make his content, like encourages his kids to make their own content and follow what their interests lie. I think they were like making like Lego videos, and it was just their hands. It wasn't their faces. I think that's a good distinction to make. Like, yeah. And at the very least, it's teaching them the skills, because, you know, as we get more and more into this content creator world, it's probably going to be becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
You might want to prepare them ahead of time.
You got to know the skills. Exactly. It is pretty like irreplaceable. And even just like, I mean, you know, since you make content, everybody who makes content has like a reoccurring experience of their friends or family or just like a coworker approaching them and being like, I want to make content too. Can you help me? And there is such like a severe learning curve. And I think most people aren't like prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for it at all. Like I'm still in the midst of the learning curve to this day, you know, like you're constantly like having to adjust your approach and like figuring out new editing methods, or like people have like a new standard for like the way that they want captions, and like all there's things that are just constantly in flux where you can't like unplug and just post and then leave, really, if you want to stay like relevant.
And I have you on the show. I mean, I think you're an interesting person. You obviously are an interesting creator. You have a lot of experience. And like you said, you're still on the learning curve. Despite the fact you have so much experience, you're still on the learning curve. And that's a good point to make, I think, for people to be watching and listening to this. It's like you have to put in 100 reps in, whether that's short form or long form or live. When you switch to the next one, you basically start over. So you were basically a short form creator, now becoming a long form creator. And so now you're kind of new at it again, and you're getting those reps in. You're going pretty quick too, at least. And you know what you're doing. It seems like you're doing really well. So not to like toot your horn too much, but like it seems like you're doing well. I saw your podcast. You started off strong. And I think that's the point is, though, like you have to get to like 100 reps before you really know what you're doing with a certain content type, and it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And like, especially, I think there's a misconception that everybody who has a couple 100,000 followers has like a huge team around them, when some people do. Like some people, I got at like 300, 400,000 followers, I got like signed to Studio 71, which is a huge agency. They're like the biggest management company for content creators in the world, which sounds like you would have a huge team of people backing you. But the reality is, unless you're like a Brittany Broski, you pretty much get like one manager, and they just kind of handle your endorsement opportunities and your emails. And then I ended up like, my manager ended up retiring. And so then I just left Studio 71 because I was there for her specifically. And then when you're trying to build your own team and vet people, it is tough out here, just because there's a lot of like predatory managers, especially if you're like a female content creator, or if you're like a teenager. I'd imagine it's probably even worse. And there's a lot of like super young content creators, and even just like figuring out like video editors or like a producer. And so at this point, it's just me. And I have a producer for the podcast who helps me coordinate guests and everything else, like all the editing, the uploads, organizing. It's really just me.
Well, I'm happy to like share whatever knowledge I have on that too. I'm glad that you have such a strong will to pursue that, even though it's hard. Like editing's my hardest thing. Like I love doing the research for the show and having the guests like feel like, oh, they feel seen, because I dug so deep into different things. Or like the calls like this. I love talking to you. That might just be the gregarious part of me, but it's fun to do this part.
Yeah.
The editing's where the bottleneck lies. I cannot stand editing. And so like recently I just started like, I went on Reddit and tried to find some like hire an editor. I got one for a little while, but he kind of went MIA. You know how like virtual people could be, but he was doing pretty well. And like we worked out a kind of a good deal, good workflow. But as soon as like a snag hit, like there was a bad video, it was bad on my part because my side, the lighting was horrible and it changed like 4 times. And so it's on me. But because of that, he didn't know how to fix it. And when I tried to help him, he got frustrated and left. And so like hiring an editor is kind of an issue. I have more people lined up now too. But the point is, it's a hard process. And then having a producer, I'm really happy for you to have one like that. Because, I mean, you got Neil deGrasse Tyson on the show. Matt, obviously something's going right.
Michael's killing it, because he really is just like super tenacious. I mean, with Neil, he just like emailed him, because like Neil's email is public. He just emailed him and was like, hey, you want to come on this podcast for free? And he didn't really expect him to say yes, because we were just looking for a scientist. I told him I really wanted to talk to a scientist about like the chicken or the egg debate. And so he was like, here's a scientist. And then shockingly, Neil said yes. And no one was expecting Neil to say yes. He was just like, we'll try it. And he said yes. And so we were like, oh my God, obviously this has to be episode 1. And with Matt Pat, I met him at John Green is one of my good friends. He only lives like 10 minutes away from me. So like Kylan and I hang out with him and his wife Sarah all the time. And his movie Turtles All the Way. I love John too. He really is so sweet and neurotic. I love him so much. But his new movie Turtles All the Way Down just came out. So we went to his premiere, and Matt Pat was also at the premiere. And so then I was talking to him for a while, and then I was like, not to be this guy, but want to come on the podcast? And he was like, sure, here's my email. And I didn't really expect him to follow up, especially because he just retired. And then he did, because he's a super nice guy. So like a lot of the times it's like that TikTok audio of Kris Jenner where she's like, why don't you just call them up? Why don't you just call him up?
Why don't you just do it? Yeah. I mean, that's how I got Ali Abdallah on my other show. Like, I don't know how I got him on per se. I just literally asked him and just kind of was being tenacious about it. Took us 3 or 4 times to schedule, but like once we did, we had a great conversation. And like, I want to get into the questions here. We have, especially the first one there is going to be really fun, but I kind of want to get into that a little bit. I didn't know how to start doing interviews. Like I was podcasting for 3 years. I had 42 episodes under my belt or ish. And I was like, I want to do interviews. And I came up across a website called matchmaker.fm. My podcast host created it. And so they were like, hey, come join us over here. It just like matches podcast guests and podcast hosts. Cool. And that's how I got started. And I didn't realize how easy it was. Essentially, you just have to ask. And if they say no, move on. Maybe ask again in a year later. Yeah. Or maybe be tenacious. This really depends on what they say no. But it's like, it's so simple.
Yeah, it's really just, it's interesting because like podcasts are essentially just like a quid pro quo for most people. Like it's just like a free exchange. And I think a lot of people who are just watching or listening to podcasts assume like, oh, wow, like they got this person, they probably had to pay a crazy fee. And I think some people probably charge a fee, like maybe for like the Call Her Daddy podcast, a lot of those celebrities, I wouldn't be surprised, even though it is a very successful podcast, if they charge a fee. But I think most of the time, people just come on like a sort of volunteer basis.
Yeah, it's an exchange of knowledge. I try to make sure people feel seen on the show, like especially the other. I keep saying that because the other show is about being polymathic, and even this show, I want your journey of being a creator to be seen, like also different aspects behind it. This leads me into my next question pretty well. The question that got you here, no less, the one you've been waiting for years. What inspires you to make the content that you do?
Like I said on TikTok, I just wanted to be like an evil Miss Frizzle so badly online. Because like that is one of my great joys in life, is being like with a group of people. It's even better if it's new people like who haven't been exposed to me yet, just because my personality is like very intense. And like I know that people are like, what the fuck is that when I start talking a lot of the time. But I love being in a group of people and being like, hey, you guys want to hear something weird and fucked up? And like, if people, if they don't, then like, I'll respect the consent of it all and be like, all right, we don't have to talk about it. But if they're like, sure. I love getting to like deliver information like that where people, it's like so odd and so strange that like they can't help but be like, all right, well, tell me a little bit more about that. What the fuck are you talking about? That brings me like a deep sense of satisfaction in life.
It feels like it comes from like almost a teacher feeling, but almost a sadistic teacher feeling.
Yeah, I feel like. I think it's just like I love like a somewhat innocent level of shock value. You know, like I'll never be like the type to do like malicious pranks or like say something like fucked up to provoke like a reaction. So like I love just like delivering weird shit that has nothing to do with me and just seeing the reaction, because it's like no one's really going to get hurt from me telling them like a weird fact about like animals or anything like that. So there's no real like negative to it, but you still get like the what are you talking about? And I love that.
How did you find that? Like what?
Yeah, I just love seeing like it's a level of like human curiosity mixed with like just like a passion. And I think that's what resonates with me, because when you tell something to somebody that's truly like alien, there's just like mankind can't help but be like, we have to dig into that more. And I love that about us as a species, I think.
And I love how too, like I'll be on TikTok late at night and then all of a sudden I see you on my feed and like you're going into some kind of deep dive and I'm like, oh, well, here we go again.
Here we go. Yeah, I love that too, because like I can always tell when like I've started like a rabbit hole for somebody, because then I'll start getting tagged in videos that are like similar from like other accounts, and then they'll be like, I got here because of you. Like you did this to my For You page. And I'm like, I love that.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of that, even YouTube does this too. Like you get down a rabbit hole one day and you start watching a whole bunch of videos of a certain topic, and then all of a sudden now your For You page or your homepage on YouTube is just flooded with it.
That's just you now. Exactly.
Yeah. Like, oh, do you have a story that you have held off on sharing when it comes to like one of these like deep dives that like you think is too effed up or something like that?
Oh my God. Held off on sharing? There's a few that
like you don't hold back much.
Yeah, I don't hold back much. There's a few on TikTok that I haven't shared, but I've shared on YouTube, just because I feel like if I read something that I'm like, wow, that's fucking crazy, but I don't share it, it's for one of two reasons. One, I won't want to platform it. So like sometimes there are certain creators. I'm going to be kind of vague here because of wanting to not platform, but there are certain creators who create content that really negatively impacts the world. And there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction that like a lot of content creators will have where they'll see that, they'll want to call it out, and they'll be like, look at what a fucking idiot this person is. And I completely get where that's coming from. And I've been guilty of that in the past, like early in my career. But I've just realized from like trial and error, I think I've done that like twice maybe in the last 4 years, that when you do that, you're exposing a whole new group of people who might not have known about that thing or that person to that. And not everyone's going to be on your side and think that that person's a fucking idiot. So, you know, at worst, you might have just converted an entire audience of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions more people to something that you're trying to condemn. And so I try not to engage in things like that, even if they are really like sensational and crazy and like interesting on a level. The other type of content that I'll think is super interesting that I'll talk about on YouTube, but I won't talk about on TikTok as much, is just when there's a super nuanced story that requires a great deal of like time and care to tell appropriately. Especially if it's like true crime. I never want to, like, there's a lot of people who do short form true crime and I think they do a good job, but I just know by nature of my personality, like I need to give something time when it's like traumatic like that. And I would never want to like try and break something down into a bite-sized piece and have like the victim be misinterpreted, or worse, have like the perpetrator be like glamorized. Those are things I'm very like cognizant of. So that's the only stuff that I won't like share in short form, is those two types of things.
It's the first one is almost like action by inaction too, no less. You're trying to like keep yourself from spreading it too much. Yeah. It's interesting to think about too. TikTok's pushing longer form content. I'm not sure if you would ever really go into that much. I mean, I thought I had the 30-minute feature enabled, but I guess not. I only have 10 minutes right now, but do you have like 30 or just 10, something like that?
I had it for like a week and then they bumped me back down to 10. So I feel like they're working it out in the beta section of it. If I had 30 minutes of space, I think at least for Spooky Saturdays or for the podcast, I would put like the first half or something on there to just encourage people to go see the whole thing, just because. But I just think with like vertical right now, you know, we just like, people haven't been trained enough to sit and stare at a vertical that long. And I feel like there's an antsiness. So I don't think it's impossible for TikTok to get there, but I do think it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn.
I was curious too, just about like what you might want to try with that. Again, with the podcast is kind of what I was thinking of. I was almost thinking either clips of it, like segments, or maybe doing what you're saying, where it's just like the first half. I had the same situation when IGTV came out too. I was trying to figure out, how do I get my show on there? How do I market it that way? But then it went away.
Yeah.
What makes you kind of crazed around this idea of being the dark Miss Frizzle? Because Miss Frizzle's already kind of dark when you look into her lore anyways, but like
she is dark, especially when you get into like the doppelganger theory and stuff, which like anyone who's watching this should look that up. But I always loved the Magic School Bus. I've always been like a curious cat, like just like from as early as I can remember. Anytime that I see something that I don't understand, whether it's like wholesome or like sort of morose, I just like can't help but like hyper fixate on that thing and try and figure it out. And by doing that, you end up finding a lot of really cool stuff that like maybe people would turn away from, or just not even think is that interesting. Because there's a lot of things, especially when you get into like history and sometimes even like science, there's a lot of things that on the surface, if you give like a TLDR, don't seem that interesting, that are very interesting. And it really comes down to like how the narrative is crafted and how it's taught, which is why I think like history isn't a more popular subject, just because I think there's a real like lack of passionate history teachers out there, because there's like the common taking the football coach, making them teach history trope that like I've had that as well. Like that's just really common for some reason, because they have to teach like an actual course, and I guess it just happens to be history a lot of the time. But when you don't have somebody who has like a passionate eye for this kind of weird shit, a lot of it slips through the cracks. And so I know that like I am good at portraying information to people through like a unique lens. And that's just like something I've kind of always excelled at. I've just always been like a talker. And so I just like I've always liked characters like that in shows and stuff because it like resonates for me.
I love that. And I'm a talker too, so I completely resonate with you on that. If you've already kind of naturally been like that over the years, was there any skills that you learned to improve yourself on that?
Yes. It's interesting because like all of my friends who like know me in real life, if they watch my TikToks, they're like, that is 100% Daisy, but it's also only 10% of me is the thing. So like I'm very authentic online, but I'm also just like a very hyperbolic person and I have like a lot of interests. So most of my audience just sees this super like narrow version of things that I'm interested in. And over time, maybe I'll get like more broad because I approach pretty much everything like it's like a job. I'm just like passion in general. But what I've learned through like trial and error is sometimes you just got to get straight to the meat of things, especially when it's a subject that most people just have like a negative experience with, like especially when you get into common like subjects that are covered in school. A lot of people are like, oh, I've heard about that, it wasn't interesting, and they're very quick to scroll. So sometimes you have to do a cold open and just get right into it, which can be like super jarring for people, and sometimes that's what you want. The other two things I've learned is never start with the word so. If you started with it when you're recording, cut it out. Like, so just cut it. I was doing this today. You know, that actually makes like a big difference in how like you land with people. You sound more confident. So like I would recommend that to people. And then secondly, don't sit still in front of the camera for too long. And if you're not a mover, you got to go in, edit it, and cut. Zoom in and zoom out every like few seconds, every like 10 to 15 seconds at least, just because people, like I said, with the vertical scrolling, they get antsy. And if you're trying to make a 4-minute video to a 10-minute video on TikTok, which is what I do a lot, once you pass that 1-minute mark, people start getting a little twitchy. So you got to give them something to keep them stimulated.
It's interesting because, again, going back to the whole short versus long, I started more long form. I've been on short for a long time, but I'm still like learning that format. And so I'm glad you're sharing your knowledge when it comes to that, especially for people coming to the show, because that's what this show is about, like being a creator, understanding different tools, understanding different platforms. My other show, the Polymath podcast, I think you probably actually be a good fit for, considering your multidisciplinary life there. And the mindset behind what you just explained too. You're taking your skills from one area and applying it to another, and you're trying to take that trans-contextual knowledge. So I like the way that you explained it.
Thank you. It helps with all types of content too, not just like information stuff. If you're doing like a vlog, just make sure that like, think of like SpongeBob. You know, SpongeBob never shows the same shot for more than 3 seconds. And it's like super visually stimulating in that way, which keeps you locked in. So I would recommend like taking that to heart and making sure that you have something for people to visually focus on. That's why there's like the side-by-sides of like the Subway Surfers next to people just monologuing, because like, people need something.
It's funny, I've been seeing all these new tools that have come out, and a lot of them are like repurposing long form into short form, but now I'm starting to see a little bit more of tools that are adding the Minecraft videos, adding the Subway Surfers to it too. I don't know if we should be endorsing that more, but it is kind of funny that it's happening.
Yeah, it's just like if you wanna get the same sort of effect without having to have something next to it, just gotta up your cutting. Just zoom in, zoom out. Sometimes that's all it takes. Like sometimes you don't even need visual aids. You just need to affect the zoom.
Speaking of doing long form, what started the Days at Night podcast?
Days at Night podcast was literally just born of people asking for it. Like I never really thought that I would be a good podcast host, to be honest. Like I just never really considered it. And after 2 years of people very regularly being like, if you had a podcast, I would listen to like every episode. I was trying to figure out like what am I even going to do in my podcast? Because like I know people want all of the same thing, but I wanted to give people something different. Otherwise, it just turns into sort of like a classroom lecture, which can have its place, but I don't know that I want to do that every week. And I was like going back and forth, and then I ended up landing on like the current format I have, which is where I just like take a guest on and like whatever they do, whatever their thing is, we're going to hyperfixate on that. And we're just going to take that interview and sort of like Daisyify it. So I just basically waited until people asked for the podcast until it got to a point where I felt like I was annoying people by not having one. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to find a producer. I'm going to get like some sort of network behind this because like, like I've already started doing YouTube. I started building up the subs there, and like I'm going to need help with this podcast for guests. So I'm just going to go for it. And now we just came out with episode 7 yesterday.
It is interesting too, because like you said, you could do that whole lecture kind of thing. And maybe that could be like a blockbuster post for you where you do like once a month and people can like look forward to it. I definitely like how you let that demand build up before you really like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always cognizant, and like maybe this is just like insecure, and like if it is, that's okay. I'm fine with being insecure. Sometimes everybody is, but like I'm always like cognizant of being an annoying content creator stereotype. I'm always worried about doing that. Like, because, for example, like I make music. I've been making music for like fucking forever, like over 10 years, but I've never really put it online anywhere because that's sort of, it's, I don't want to be annoying. Like, I know that like people will be like, every time someone hits 1 million followers, they put their album out. But I do have my intro song on my podcast is one of my songs that I just am using as like the jingle. And a lot of people have started asking for the full song. So if I'm going to ever put out music, it would be because people like asked for it. Like I really just wait till my audience asks for things and then I'm like, sure. Or like when I was selling prints, it was because like I had my art in my office in the background, like just coincidentally. And then people were like, I would buy that. And I was like, okay. Like I'm not much of like a pusher with my audience. I just kind of like wait to see like, oh, you guys care about that? All right, sure. Here you go. You can have it, I guess.
I think it's an interesting philosophy too, because like you're not pushing too much. I do think that you probably could push more because you obviously have an interesting personality. It's one of those things where people are here because they want to see you. That's fine. I think that if you made music, it wouldn't be annoying. I don't think you'll be the stereotype in that case. I understand why you think that, but I don't think you would. If anything, too, your YouTube channel is your personal brand. And the way I see it is like, if music's part of your life, especially for a decade, no less. I knew I heard that somewhere. I was going to put that in the intro, but I was like, I forgot exactly where I heard it. I wanted to make sure it was confirmed before I put it in the intro. I'm like,
it's freaking,
but the point is,
it's Tiva again, dude. She sings on TikTok and she keeps telling all of my followers who want her. She keeps outing them to me that I make music and being like, it's good. You should pressure her. That's where that rumor is coming from. It's coming from my best friend who harasses me to do things all the time.
And fair enough, you could maybe even make a second channel for it. I do feel like this is a whole other topic we can get into too, like how many niches can you have on one channel? I believe in having like a meta niche. That meta niche is your personal brand. Everything can fall underneath there. Although this show started out on my main channel, but I realized both of my interview series were competing with each other. I need to separate it just for the sake of like SEO and like, but like it still all is underneath that same brand, umbrella brand. I think for you, especially since it's your personal brand too, it's probably fine. I love singing. I've been doing karaoke for 10 years because I wanted to learn how to sing because I was never classically trained. And
I love that.
I passionately want to like start professionally singing too. So I definitely understand that mindset behind you and how it's like, not about me, it's about you on the show, but I just want to share this because I don't really get like upset when I hear my voice on a podcast anymore. Like that's something you have to get past as a podcast.
Yeah, you do have to kind of get used to it.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
The other day though, I was watching a video of me singing and it made me cringe because it's one of those things where I was singing well, but just it's different than podcasting, different than talking.
Totally.
Recently I put my headphones into my microphone and I could hear the reverb of my voice and I was like, oh, that's weird again. But again, it wasn't a big deal. Hear myself singing online, something I had to get past. And I think that maybe this is a different version of you for you. Like you have to get past what you're expecting people to say. Yeah,
I think it's just I treat like I've never been like a diary writer, but I treat my songs as like a diary, and they're very like I really only write a song if I have something to say. And I have a lot of songs because I like to yap, so like evidently I have a lot of things to say. But my friends all say that I hoard my music because like I do, like a dragon with a pot of gold.
I was about to say the dragon. Yeah, exactly the reference I was going to make.
I have like 3 albums that I've never like put out anywhere, and all of my friends have it though. Like I'll just be like, I'm like a drug dealer with my own songs, so I'll be like, here's the thumb drive that you asked for, and then they'll be listening to it. Like some of my friends have been listening to some of these songs on a regular basis, know all the words for like years now, and they're like, you gotta stop gatekeeping. And so I know that like the people who like it actually do authentically like it. I'm just kind of a puss.
All right, best friend, leak the CD, leak the album. Come on.
I gotta stop being such like a puss about it, because also it's like I'm such like a direct person that like people would hear these songs and be like, oh, she's like there would be a discourse about them, which I'm okay with. But I think my little inside nervous version of myself is like, we have to get ready for that. You have to prepare, but I'll get there eventually.
Your whole content ecosystem encourages discourse. Like all this, like everything you do. Like what?
I know.
If anything, it's completely on brand.
I know. That's what everyone keeps telling me. I really just have to stop being such an absolute puss about it. And I mean, like I am like classically trained and stuff, so I really shouldn't have. I don't have stage fright unless it's with music for some reason. And I think that's just because it's my most vulnerable state, and I just gotta get over it, honestly.
That's why I went to karaoke religiously, because like I had to get past my stage fright. I always wanted to be on stage, but I was deathly afraid of it. I would sing every day, walking everywhere, and teach myself that way. But being on stage was a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
The first night I ever sang, my leg was shaking. I was so nervous, like full on, just like vibrating.
That's how it is. Like I did theater for such like a long time, and like I could do like a 1-woman show every night for months, not give a single fuck about it, be like 100% fine, zero anxiety opening night. Everyone else could be throwing up from stress, and I would be like, when do we start it? In like a minute? All right, like and not care. But then for some reason when it comes to the music component, like if I'm in a musical, then I get stage fright for like the first time. I don't know. It's like a weird facet of my personality, I guess.
I wonder if it just comes back down to the 100 reps thing too, like being into like 100 musicals or just putting out 100 songs or whatever it might be.
I think it is. Yeah. I think it's just because all my artistic outlets, I just like use in like a very therapeutic sense. And so like, I know some people draw purely for like the discipline of drawing, but like with me, anytime I do anything creative, it's just because like I have something I gotta like get out really badly. And I think like with art, that's like anxiety that I have to like get out and like nervous energy. But then with like music, it's always some like way more like intense feelings. And so I think I'm like, I don't know if people can see me be sad.
Yeah, you don't want to open up that part of yourself just yet, I guess.
Yeah, I think I have to. I'm getting there. My friends are all harassing me, especially Tiva. So, like, I know I'll eventually get there, and I do want to get there because I do really like my songs. I just have to stop being a little puss about it.
I mean, I don't think you're being a little puss about it. I think you're just trying to wait until you feel like you're ready, which is understandable. Do you think acting school has made a difference? Yes. Do you think acting school has made a difference in your content?
Oh my God, definitely. Definitely. And I actually think like pretty much like I think a lot of content creators are theater kids that people wouldn't expect to be. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like Drew Afflo is a theater kid. Like a lot of the people who are really dynamic online, even if they're not acting in videos, like it has nothing to do with like a typical like way you would think of a thespian. I think a lot of people have like theater training, and that's why they're able to manifest like charisma through the screen. Because it's a stage presence.
Right.
Yeah.
I never really admitted this on the show before, but I definitely had the envy of like wanting to be a theater kid. I never was one. People have asked me if I was one, but I never got a chance to do it in like high school or after. And I'm like, I feel like I should have.
You probably would have loved it. If you love karaoke, you probably would have loved it. I loved being in theater, and like that was like my whole dream for like a long time was like just to act. And like I worked in film as like a casting PA on the production side, and like did a bunch of stuff to try and like get there. And then I had spinal surgery, and I just was like like severed from it briefly. But what I love about like my job now is it's like sort of like bringing me back there. And I would love one day to like be in like a show or something like that. I think I would have like such a great time. But it definitely helps with like the stage training, and it definitely helps from like a media training standpoint, because our acting program was a conservatory program. So it's very intense. It was literally just acting. So like, well, we had to do like workouts in the morning. So it was about like being as presentable of an image as possible. And so they made you like eat a certain way, work out a certain way. We had vocal lessons. We had acting classes for like drama, for comedy. And then we had media training. So like, how would you do in an interview? How would you talk in the audition room? And I think that that has like aided me more than anything, just from like both like a video making standpoint and like a networking standpoint.
That's interesting. I definitely want to get into the whole networking thing, because you definitely seem, as a talkative person, be able to network well. But I'm curious what kind of skills you might have learned or taught yourself to do, or from the school too, no less. The other thing I was going to ask is like, obviously the spinal surgery was a big deal. School justice is something that's very serious. How do you think that's impacted your life, or even your content too?
Oh my God, it's definitely like changed my life. Like, in both positive and negative ways. Positive, I would be dead if I didn't get it. So like, that's important.
I'm glad you got it done.
I'm glad I didn't die. That was a touch and go for a second there, but also it's just had like such a negative effect in so many other ways. I have like really debilitating like chronic pain on like a day-to-day basis, and I used to like smoke a lot to self-medicate that, and then I've stopped doing that for last year. So this past year I've been having a really difficult time just with like managing my pain levels on a day-to-day basis, which I don't think like my audience would think that of me through the camera, because I'm generally I have like a very bubbly disposition. And I do have a pretty high pain tolerance, but like on a day-to-day basis, my pain's like an 8 because of that. And it'll probably always be like that. And like on the podcast, you can really see like the way that I sit is very like weird, because my back is like straight. Like I kind of look like a Polly Pocket in the way that I move. And so I think in real life, I moved like very odd, and I didn't have like as strong of an awareness of how odd it is until I started being on camera all the time and seeing myself. And then I was like, what the hell? Why am I moving like that? And it's because I can't bend.
I honestly, what I noticed, I'll just tell you what I thought. When I first saw your podcast, I saw you leaning back like this. And I honestly just thought you looked like, a villain or someone like cool. Like just like you just had that kind of cool girl pose. So that's what I first initially thought. So at the very least, it comes across good on that.
Yeah, that's actually the way that I the way that I sit in the podcast episode is, speaking of acting school, is a direct response to acting school, because in acting school, when you walk out onto like the stage for an audition, if you're doing a stage audition, or even if you're going into like a filmed audition, they teach you this phrase called big and slow. So if you want to signal that you're confident, even if you're very nervous, even if you have stage fright, you move big and slow. And so like you take up as much space as you want, you move slowly and confidently, like you don't rush out onto stage, like you just slowly walk out there. Like, hi, I'm Daisy Foko. I'm going to be reading this. And whether or not you're freaking the fuck out on the inside doesn't matter, because externally you'll look very collected. And so for like the Neil episode, I was stressed out. Like I was very nervous. And so like I was sitting on the couch, and I like, before we were filming, before he got there, I was like sitting like this. And then my producer, Michael, was like, you got to look more confident. And then I was like, oh yeah, big and slow. And so then I was like, I'm going to sit like this the whole time, and I'm going to look so relaxed. And it does make you look a lot more relaxed.
You do look pretty chilled on the call, yeah.
You look pretty chilled, even though I was freaking out.
It's interesting because I somehow self-discovered that, like just taking up more space. I did learn online too, like, okay, if you take up more space, you look more confident. But I self-discovered the fact that like you could fake it. You could fake it till you make it. And a lot of people don't realize you could do that, even with content too. Right now, I'm looking at the camera because I want you to look like if you're looking at the screen, looking at me, that's fine. But if I'm talking to you and you do end up looking down, I wanted to make it look like I'm looking at you, because it makes it seem like, okay, I am listening to what you're saying as a guest. And then even as a viewer, I'm looking at the viewer then at that point too. And I just think that's something we learn as content creators, as videographers, But there's certain things like that, like the hand gestures. That's why I do a video podcast as well, because there's that essence you can only get by seeing. And I think taking up bigger space, it's a really good point for people to learn from.
Yeah, it especially like a lot of female content creation creators when they're first starting out have a real anxious like, hey, sorry, like I don't want to annoy anybody. Like sorry I look like shit today. I'm just trying to You don't need to do any of that. First of all, I look like shit on TikTok like every day. Like half of my videos, I just woke up. Like I literally have been awake for like 5 minutes. You can tell. That's fine. Like it's fine. Don't put unnecessary pressure. That's what I'm saying. Because like you're a normal person and you have normal friends, and we see people in real life in various states of readiness all the time.
Right.
You know, and so like for me, I've just never put too much pressure on myself to like look a certain way in every single video, just because this kind of creates an unrealistic standard for yourself. Not even the way that affects other people, because it definitely affects other people, I think. But mainly it's just like, as a matter of self-preservation, don't make yourself have to do a full face beat every single day. That's a lot. That's like a lot of time. You don't need to do that. Sometimes you can just get on there. You know what I mean? And so things like that contribute to coming across confident too. Because like I've had like a face mask on TikTok and looked like shit. And I don't always feel good about it, but I'm also more preoccupied with whatever I'm talking about than I am with how I look. And maybe later I'll be like, what? That one got 12 million views. Why didn't that take like 2 seconds before I started filming that? But sometimes that's the secret sauce. You know, maybe if I took 2 seconds and looked a little more presentable, it wouldn't have gotten 12 million views. You never know. Especially
with TikTok, because I've seen people spend 3 hours making a 30-second video and it flops. And then they spend 30 seconds making a 30-second video and it blows up.
Exactly.
And so you can't predict it half the time.
You can't. You just gotta roll with the punches. And like I know there's some people have very rigid content formats for like if you're like a makeup content creator, like that's a whole different thing. Like I totally get that that's like your bag. But if you're somebody who's just on the internet to yap, my notes to you are don't fucking worry about it, you know?
Yeah. Is there any topic you haven't yapped about that you want to yap about?
On TikTok?
Just in
or
general,
in life?
Yeah, sure, that too.
That's a good question, because like I think I'm just starting to get into this like a little bit more with like the true crime stuff peripherally, but I really like human psychology, and I find like the way in which humans develop like our social structures to be like super, super interesting. And so I have like in real life, if I'm talking to somebody, like I talk about things like that a lot more than maybe somebody on TikTok would realize from my short form content. I have really strong pattern recognition, and a lot of my like daily conversation is rooted in that, where like somebody will be like, do you feel like that guy was nervous when we were talking to him at the bar? And I'll be like, oh yeah, he was averting eye contact like 80% of the time, would look up only pretty much at you. So he definitely felt a little bit more comfortable with you than he felt with me. And like a lot of my conversations center around things like that, which is odd, but I feel like it's very useful. Like I don't know why I hyperfixate on things like that so much and go full-fledged like Sherlock Holmes with like body language and stuff, but like
love that.
I love stuff like that.
Daisy, you are my twin, because I've done the same thing. I've obsessed around micro expressions. I've learned body language and in fact, I did it at karaoke. Half the reason why I went to karaoke religiously, was to learn how to sing and be present on stage. Like I was passionate about learning that. The other half was like, I wanted to practice social skills. I wanted to be able to approach random tables, random people, and like be able to talk to them and like understand the body language. Like for example, when there's a circle of people and their feet are facing away, that means they're not wanting to fit in the circle. If they turn their feet towards you, then you can force a circle.
Yeah, whoever somebody like looks at in a group when they're laughing is the person who they care about the most. You know, things like that. Like I'm like so into stuff like that. I love like thin slicing. Like if you've read like Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, if you haven't, you really should. Like I love all of that stuff, and I know it's like some of it is like pseudoscience, but I still find it interesting regardless. Like I just think it's cool to be able to break things down into like these super like micro levels, and I find that it like benefits me because I feel like I'm very socially odd, and like I actually don't think that about myself, but I hear that all the time, so I'm assuming it must be true because I've been hearing it for like 25 years. So presumably people wouldn't be in like a giant conspiracy against me to gaslight me into thinking that I'm socially odd. presumably I'm actually just kind of socially odd.
She's onto us.
Yeah, so like I think because of that, like I've developed an interest in it, 'cause I'm like very analytical in certain regards, and so like I think it's just my way of studying and like researching is just being sort of anthropological with it and being like, what's going on over there? What are they doing? Why is what I'm doing weird? Interesting. And like a lot of times I'll know that something isn't like the proper social cue, but I just will disregard it out of like preference.
I know. I don't really think it's down to like neurodivergence or something like that. I think it's just a matter of personality on top of it. And just societal norms are also getting just really weird nowadays, I feel like. Yeah,
they're really shifting very, very quickly. And in some ways that's like made my life easier. In other ways it's made it harder.
You're a systematic thinker. You like the patterns. I like that too. I feel it. Yeah.
I do like the pattern.
Yeah, I've gotten in trouble because I've been seeing patterns at like my job or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, this leads to this person doing this thing, and if that happens, then I get in trouble, or they get in trouble, or someone gets hurt. Especially when as a lifeguard, I was like, okay, someo's actually gonna get hurt. If that pattern happens. And I would try to prevent that, and if I didn't do it right, I'd get yelled at. I was like, I was just trying to do the right thing. Come on, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's why I really am glad I have a non-traditional career, because in strong like hierarchy-based careers, I really have like a very difficult time, just because it's very hard for me to adhere to that like hierarchy order. Like I know it exists, but I just can't get myself to care about it enough. Like if my boss is yelling at me in front of everybody, I will go into their office and be like, hey, what the hell was that? You can't just yell at people. Like that was not appropriate. And they're like, that's not appropriate of you. And I'm like, I know that on like an analytical level, but also human to human, you're being whack right now. You can't just yell at people because you get paid more. If anything, you should be nicer to us because you get paid more. And so I think I would have always struggled in like an office environment because of that.
I worked for this type A entrepreneur at one point. I loved the guy. He was so nice normally, but when he would lose his cool, he would fly off the handle. He would ask you, like, since it's a small business, we do a lot of repairs ourselves. And if like he asked you to go get a certain bit for the drill or something like that, and you got the wrong bit, he would yell at you, scream at you. And I was like, I have too much trauma for that shit. He can't be doing it to me. Like,
that's
come on.
And
yeah, like I can't do that. What you talked earlier about, like you make music and other kind of content like that to be able to express yourself and express certain feelings and thoughts. I like doing that with writing. I'm curious to see if you would ever go into writing. You're obviously getting into podcasting now, that kind of thing.
You know it's interesting because like my job on a level is just sort of narrative crafting around like different subjects and stuff. And so you would think that like writing would come easily to me. But though I have like very vivid ideas and like concepts, I don't think I could ever be like a standalone writer, just because I honestly think I lack the discipline. Even though I get like hyper fixated into things very easily, I'm just not sure that that's something I'd ever be able to stand on my own doing. Because my boyfriend, like his job is like he's in the NFL, but his like passion is writing. And so he writes a lot, and like he hasn't published any of it yet, but he writes a lot, and then I'll proofread it and give him feedback. And I'm always so impressed by his ability to just like sit down and like build a world like that. Whereas like me, like I have like super, super vivid dreams. I have like a nightmare disorder, so a lot of them are like negative, but I do remember all of my dreams, and a lot of them operate in a linear like timeline, which is like odd. Like I will go back to like the same weird dream universes over and over, and there's like a ton of them, but it'll pick up wherever it left off. Maybe 2 years ago, maybe a week ago, maybe a day ago, and then it'll continue moving forward as a plot. So if I were to ever write anything, I really think I would just reiterate my dreams with like minor tweaks. I'm not sure that I could ever create something from scratch, even though like I would kind of love to.
Well, and when I think of writing, my brain kind of goes to like nonfiction or like, you know, doing the more teaching-based content. But what you kind of talked about, there's more storytelling and creative content. And also too, especially if it comes down to like the words and stuff like that, maybe you could just use voice to text and like use some kind of app to like just transcribe what you're saying. So you could just talk about what your dream was and then turn it into a written piece. Yeah,
I thought about like if I were to write anything, I think the most successful way I could do it myself is like, I don't know if you read webtoons, but I love webtoons. And if you're not reading webtoons, like you should. The app is free. peep webtoons. Like I fucking love webtoons, but I think just because I like to illustrate and stuff, and because they're so short, like, and you know, you can spend like a lot of time in between chapters and stuff before you release them. I think maybe I could convert my dreams into webtoon like series, and I would be happy with that. Like, I think I would be content with that. Or like if I ever wrote like a show, it'd have to be like a Love, Death, and Robots kind of show where like every episode is like unique. I'm not sure that I have like, though I resent saying this because like it's so cool and like I wish I could do this, but like I have to have a certain degree of self-awareness. Like I wish I could be like a Game of Thrones type like writer, because like I just love content like that that's like super intricate, and like they've had like a plan for like books in advance. Like I appreciate that so deeply, but I just don't know that that's within my scope.
I think that it is possible. I actually, from a young age, I have a saga in mind for like a video game series that could also be other media too. But like, it's like super cool. I love it. I haven't really talked much about it because I'm not ready to push it out yet. But I use knowledge management tools. That's what my main channel is about. It's knowledge management for Polymath and tools to organize your multidisciplinary life. That'd be helpful to you just in general because you're obviously like doing a lot of different things. But some of these tools help relate different ideas together and cause that idea emergence, and some people use it for writing. So like Obsidian, for example, has bidirectional linking, so one note can link to another note, and so when you have ideas like that or dreams that might relate to each other, you can link them together.
Oh, that's actually really cool. I might do that because I kind of love my dreams, even though a lot of them are like nightmares. It's sort of like I'm just like very invested in the plots, honestly.
You do it for the plot.
Yeah, I actually do it for the plot.
But,
okay, cool.
This is Obsidian, and so this is a tool to help note take everything. So every one of these dots is something in my vault. So the green dots are tags and folders. I have a special plugin that also makes the folders appear here, but usually it's just the tags. And then every white dot is a different note. And so like this one down here is different books that I want to read, and so they're all there. These are, I don't know what that is. But like, let's see, articles
it's
probably.
It's like a galaxy.
Yeah. There's actually a 3D version of this plugin. It's really cool. Just lags really bad.
This is so cool. I think I would like this. This is very satisfying to my brain because it's sort of fracticular. I love fractals. So I will use that because I feel like that works for me.
It's one of those things where, especially for someone like us who are multidisciplinary, doing a lot of different things, for a specialist, it's important to have a system like a notepad or something like that to organize your thoughts. Some people call it a second brain. It's not quite apt for people like us. Like OmniBrain's probably more perfect. But the idea of being able to organize multiple different areas of expertise and keep track of all those different threads, that kind of thing.
I like that. That's very cool.
I figured you would. Speaking of tools, one of the reasons why I like having people on the show, because I like talking shop as a creator. What tools do you use for content creation and repurposing?
I use CapCut for pretty much like everything, like the vast majority of my editing, because my editing's not super involved. Like I'll do like overlays and I'll do like cuts and like zooms, and that's pretty much like it. Every once in a while I have to like drown out some like white noise in the background, or like adjust like some music and stuff, but it's not like too crazy. And so to get rid of the watermark, before they made it so that you could just save videos straight from TikTok, which like thank God, because that like saves me so much time now. But like pre that, I used to just download the videos as a live photo and then download the videos with the watermark, convert the live photo into a video, overlay it over the extracted audio of like the watermarked video, and then repost it everywhere else. So like now that you can just save it, it saves me so much time.
And I hate to be the one to say this, but there is a tool to let you download your TikToks and get rid of the watermark too.
I know there is now. Like I found that like right before they got the autosave thing, and I was like, oh wow, this is revolutionary. And then they were like, why don't you just save it from the app? And I was like, oh.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because like since you're doing short form first, you're doing it from your phone versus like doing it from a PC camera. So there's a difference in how you record.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot different. Like sometimes I'll sit down and use like a ring light, and I'll be in like, we're in my film room right now. So like it's all like sound insulated, and I got like a green screen behind you and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll do that, but for the short form, it's pretty much like wasted. People really prefer like the influencer shake, like of you just holding the camera, at least as far as my videos go. You know, whenever I do use a tripod, they just get less views for some reason. I think it's because it takes away from like maybe like a little bit of the manic energy, perhaps. Like I'm not sure, but like long form, I have like a lighting rig set up. We're in this insulated room. I've got good microphones. I got a 4K camera, and then I'll edit all of that with the Adobe suite. So I like use Adobe Premiere for everything, editing wise, and then I'll use like Photoshop to like make the thumbnails, and like sometimes I'll use Canva as like an assist. And that's pretty much all the tools that I use. And I do have I have a webcom like illustrating computer as well that like goes down, turns into like a tablet. It's like a architectural tablet. So like if I draw, I'll use that, and like every once in a while I'll draw something for like a long form video. But
yeah, I definitely seen a lot of YouTubers do like their own little animations of the people talking in the videos as well. And you talked about like webtoons too, so I can definitely see you using that more and more. It's interesting too to think about. You said you use CapCut, and then you're like, oh yeah, I also had the whole Adobe suite as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I have to be fair. Like I'm bootlegging the Adobe suite away because like my dad uses it for his job, and so I just get to use his login because it lets you use 2 different computers. So he has the whole Adobe suite, and when I was like, hey, I'm making long form content. Any chance I could use the Adobe suite because it's like really expensive?
Yeah, no, it really is. I use DaVinci Resolve because it's free, but it keeps breaking down on me. It's one of those things where I was like, I kind of wish I had Adobe, especially since there's actually other tools now like Firecut, Autopod that you could drop in your podcast, and it just like automatically chops it up for you, cuts out the ums and ahs.
Yeah, stuff like that is like super convenient. Like AI is getting really, really close to just optimizing, even with like CapCut. Some of the CapCut edits for short form go hard, where I'm like, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Shout out to Opus Clip, by the way. They're one of the people I work with because I drop every interview into that and I get like 30 clips out of it. So it's crazy.
Oh, I got to do that because I got to start getting more clips for YouTube Shorts because my podcast keeps getting ripped on YouTube Shorts, and then people upload clips before me, and then they get tons of views. And then
I got you. I'll help you out with that.
For like, whose podcast is this? Because they like don't tag me, and then I'm like, it's mine. But I'm like one of like a million people commenting, and I'm like, it's just me.
Yeah, it's frustrating because like that is an issue with a lot of these new tools that have come out. I think Opus tries to really fight that, but there's a lot of tools out there that have been kind of coming out of the woodwork, and it's like people do it all the time with Alex Ramosi, but people know Alex Ramosi for the most part. Yeah, and there's like a lot of other podcasts that just keep getting ripped, and it's like Zach Justice, for example, with his show, the Dropouts podcast or whatever, like that got ripped so many times.
Yeah, and since we're such like a new podcast, you know, and like my YouTube channel is still really small, but we just hit 10K. Love that for me.
Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
I was very excited.
Gotta celebrate those wins.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like that also is as far as like, you know, like good advice for content creation goes. Like you do got to celebrate those wins. Like first 1,000 followers, that's pretty good. You know, like you got to be excited about stuff like that.
I just hit about like I'm 19.9K views on my main channel because of all the podcast clips I'm sitting out, and it's like that's really cool. I only have like 400 subscribers on that channel. It's like, oh, that's cool.
That's good. Heck yeah.
I want to put this out there. I think she's gonna have 100 subscribers on YouTube by the end of the year.
100,000 on YouTube?
Yes, I think you will.
I honestly would love that for me. My brother said something very similar recently. I feel like YouTube is harder to break into the algorithm, but I feel like once you're in there, you're solidly in there. So I think I'm chipping away. I'm clawing my way in there.
And sometimes it's like optimization. Like I had my channel for years, but it was like knowledge management and Polymath, and I would just make 2 different kind of things, 2 different streams, when in actuality it was both. Like that's how it's always been, but I needed to change the marketing to say that. And once that happened, I think it's helped a lot. So maybe just like optimizing the channel to figure out what you want to like really be showed for, like on that channel, like what do you want to be known for on there. But can you share your favorite story that's happened to you as a creator?
Oh, that's happened to me as a creator? That's actually, okay, my favorite story that's happened to me as a creator happened this year at one of my boyfriend's games. So this is the first year, like for reference, like after the Colts games, the players come up out of like a tunnel into the parking lot, and it's fenced off, but like fans will wait at the outside of the fence so that they can do autographs and stuff. Kylan's been in the league for 3 years. He's going into his 4th year this season. This is the first year, this past year, where people have been waiting at the fence for me as well. And I was hype. Like every game, there's been at least one person who was like, Daisy. And I love that. And so 2 really cool things happened this year. Like I love running into people who follow me in person. Like it is like makes my day every single time. Because I never leave the house also. So I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, I made a friend. And so 2 really cool things happened. Like this one guy, I love him. He's been following me forever. His name is Andrew. I remember a lot of people who follow me if they interact a lot. Like I remember their names pretty well. So Andrew, he like loves my pet fish and stuff. Like he always like comments on everything. Like he's such a sweetie. He came to one of the games and he made me a friendship bracelet. And it was so cute. I was like, I wore it, like literally wore it for like a month until the string broke. And then I got a new string and restrung it. And now I have it like saved in my bathroom so that it won't break again. And then there's this other woman who's like so sweet who like loves me and Kylan. Like she likes our couples videos. And so she made shirts that said like 83 on them, but they said Mr. Daisy on the back. And she got them for us. And so I loved it. And my mom happened to be visiting that week. And my mom's kind of a stage mom. So it was like kind of the perfect time for her to visit. Because she was like, oh my God, I love this. Like she was freaking out. So those are the like first 2 times that I've gotten like gifts in person. Sometimes people will like mail me art and that's always really exciting too. But that's the first time people have been like, I made this for you. Here you go. And I love that. I really appreciated it.
That's so sweet. And I love asking that question too, because everybody answers it so differently. And it's always just something like that's so fascinating to think about. And I wonder what the next gift's going to be.
I know. And then eventually I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to be like, guys, don't spend any money on me. Like keep your stuff. But I love it also. And so I don't know. It just makes me like, I feel like it's giving me a lot of perspective on the way other people interact with people who support them and stuff. And it's like, I've never really liked the people who are like mean to their fans. I've always felt like that's just like in really bad taste, you know? But now that I have people who are like invested in me, it's just, I feel that way so much more deeply where I'm just like, how could you possibly like be rude to people who are supporting you, even if maybe they're like a little overexcited or like it's giving you a little bit of nervousness, as long as people aren't like breaching any sort of like boundaries and they're just like excited, like you should always be grateful. Like that's just the right thing to do, I think.
One of the big podcasters I learned from, I don't want to say any names per se, but I learned from him. Pretty much everyone saw when you first start, like that's one of the big podcasters. I heard from fellow podcasters that he's kind of an ass in real life. And it's just like, it's not Joe Rogan, by the way. I'm not talking about him, but it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, that's interesting. Cause like when you see his personality on the show, like he seems very like genuine or whatever, but it's like, okay, that kind of sucks. And then recently there's a guy who I looked up to as a creator named Pat Flynn. He has Smart Passive Income. That's where he kind of started his journey. Now he has like a Pokemon trading card channel that blew up. It's amazing that like how much success he's had just in the last year or so. And I went to a YouTuber conference, Think Media's conference a month ago or so. And I got to meet him there. And I got to meet like someone who I looked up to as a creator. And he is so sweet, genuine in person. And it was just one of those things where like I got to take a couple pictures with him, that kind of thing. He's like, in the photo too. It's like, that's so awesome. It's crazy how like when you get to meet a creator you look up to.
Yeah, it is. It makes like such a big difference because like so far I've had like the fortune of like everybody who I've been mutuals with who I've met in real life has been super awesome and has been very authentic to the way that they present themselves online. So like anybody who you see like a lot of crossover content with me and them, it's because like we're actual friends. Like I never do collabs just for like the sake of clicks, and that's not to say that that'll never happen. Like maybe an opportunity will present itself where that makes sense, but so far like Jessica Burbank and I have a lot of crossover content, and that's because like we're actually friends and our audiences told us that we should hang out because they felt like we would get along well, and so we did, and then we do get along well. And she visits me in Indiana once a month, and so anytime that we make videos it's because she's sleeping over at my house for like the weekend or like if John Green and I make videos together, like it's because we hang out all the time. Like, and I love him and his kids and his wife and stuff. And like Kylan and I went with him and like his kids to like Universal so that Sarah could go to an art museum with her mother-in-law. And like, like it's just like everybody who I've met online who's an internet friend who's crossed over into real friend territory have all been like such wonderful people that really are exactly the way they seem to be online.
Right. And I hope that like one day we could be that way too, like be friends. And it's one of those things where like if people come on your show, for example, like Matt Platt, I could tell from the beginning that you guys had some kind of connection beforehand because you naturally are more friends in person. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, cool. Like obviously that's how you guys connected and it's how you're able to like keep that connection going. And it's interesting to think about like when you have someone on the show who might be really big, like pretty much everyone I've interviewed is way bigger than me, right? I don't have them on the show for the clicks. I don't care about that. Like, obviously I want to grow, but what I care about is like, they have an interesting story to tell. They're interesting people, like, especially with their journey too. Like, it's so unique. I want to be able to explore that. That's what I care about.
That's the way to go, I think. Cause like, and I also think that's probably why, like, I wouldn't be surprised if like you make a new friend every single time somebody comes on your show. Cause like, I feel like that's what happens with me. Like, if it's not the one I'm already friends with, by the end, I'm like, and now we're just best friends.
Yeah. There's been plenty of people who I've had on the show, like, I would have a pint with you or something like that. Like,
oh,
that's go to the bar with you. Yeah.
I would have a pint with you.
Oh, thank you, Daisy. I would too. It's interesting to think about like some of the interesting people you've had on the show, stuff like that. One thing you've talked about recently actually was building a greenhouse. So how has that impacted your life?
Dude, I am hyped. Like right before I got on here, like literally directly before, I was in the greenhouse because I ordered this like solar powered irrigation kit. Because I'm like I want to make sure, because I have ADHD, that I don't underwater the plants ever. Like, and if I like don't go out for a day, like I want them to survive. So I just filled it up like 2 days ago with like a ton of like fruits and vegetables and herbs. Like I've been waiting for this greenhouse for like a year. Like I have been planning this out forever. And so I got like a solar powered irrigation kit for it. It like collects rainwater that comes off the roof and then waters all the plants. Like I'm like the queen of spending a bunch of extra time up front on something so that it's optimized and I can be lazy later. So, like, I'm never going to have to water this thing ever again now. Right. And all I have to do is just go pick fruits and vegetables.
I was going to ask if you're going to do rainwater collection. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So, like, I will always put in extra work on the up end so that I can cut corners later and be lazy.
Do you think that, is there any plants that you're, like, planning on getting that you just can't get just yet?
Yes, I'm getting 2 things that I haven't gotten yet and that I have to like order because they're not in Indianapolis naturally because they don't grow well in this zone. So I'm getting a citrus tree and a lemon tree because I put the greenhouse on a bed of gravel, but under that it's just clay. So I did that on purpose so that it could like dig down and plant these 2 trees because they'll die in the winter in Indianapolis, but I really wanted like fresh oranges and lemons. And you can prune those trees pretty well to make sure that they don't get super, super big, but they still produce a lot of fruit. And it's going to smell so good in there. Like, it already smells really good because, like, basil and stuff and, like, the rosemary. But it's going to be incredible in there, like, just from the lemon tree alone. I'm very excited. I'm going to make some sorbets. I'm hyped about it.
That sounds awesome. And especially since, too, like, being able to provide your own food is just, like, I don't know if, like, living off the grid is something that's always kind of, like, tickled my fancy. But it's just, like, having that ability to, like, sustain yourself just without having to, like, go out is nice. Especially since, like you said, you don't leave the house much either.
Exactly. I'm so, like, I don't think I'm, like, diagnostically agoraphobic, but I might as well be because I don't go anywhere. Like, I really don't, like... the greens always have to tell me to go touch grass, and so like now that it's like warm outside, I've been trying to spend a lot of time in my yard. I got a bunch of outdoor furniture. I'm getting a hammock so that I'll like be outside more because I do have like we live like surrounded by the woods, so it is actually nice outside so long as it's not like super cold. And I have like 2 Dobermans, so I got to be outside for a certain chunk of the day anyway. So like I am really happy that I'm getting to spend more time outside now, and more of my friends like from Texas and New York are being able to like visit me in this next year and stuff, and so like we'll be able to hang out in my greenhouse and cook banger meals. I'm excited.
The greens you mentioned, I was actually gonna be asking you earlier when we were talking about like learning those social skills, a different kind of green. Have you ever like listened to Robin Greene's books?
No. What are they?
The 48 Laws of Power, Mastery.
Oh, Dude,
Like,
I want to read those so bad because I've only ever read excerpts of them because like of course like the whole tagline of like the laws of power being banned in the prison industrial system is like
yeah,
immediately like should I
really.
read that fucking book? Like
Yeah.
that's interesting. I have that on my like Audible list. Like I downloaded it. I haven't listened to it yet, but I really want to purely because like I think I think like learning about how manipulation like works is really important for pretty much everybody, not because it's a good thing to be manipulative, but because it's good to know about those patterns so that you don't fall victim to somebody else's manipulation, or maybe you know how to engage with somebody who is like predatory in a way that's like as safe as possible. Like if you don't learn about how people like that operate, you might not know like, oh, this is someone I should gray rock, or this is somebody who I should just avoid in general, or this is somebody who I need to like flatter and like have a bond response with. I think it's just like it's a useful tool, and like naturally there will be people who abuse that tool, but there are people who abuse those tools without having read those books, you know. So maybe we should just all read the book so we're all on the same page.
I also personally like a lot of Robert's just anecdotes and mindset because he does come from just a natural place. And I like podcasts. I listen to a lot of them. I haven't done as much recently. Obviously, I make them, so like I'm in that world. But it's one of those things where very little have I like actively gone after someone's podcast. And Robert is a very prolific guest on many different shows. And I've gone out of my way to listen to a lot of his episodes, pretty much all of them, just because every time he says something unique. His next book is called The Sublime. Like, and it's like he's talking about the sublime of life. That's such a unique concept that no one else is talking about. And also, are you on Spotify at all?
I am on Spotify.
Do you have premium?
No. Should I get it? Everyone keeps saying
because
that.
you get audiobooks on premium now.
Okay.
And so now you can listen to
know that.
Robert Greene's books on premium.
I should definitely do that because as much as I love Audible, it is breaking the bank.
It's so expensive. I don't want to pay $15 for every book.
So
I'd rather just pay $15 for Spotify.
I know, it's true. I think you just sold me. I had no idea they did the audiobook thing on Spotify Premium.
That's why I had to help you out there. I got one more question here for you, unless we have going on another tangent or two. What do you have coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
Man, coming down the line, that's such a good question because I've been trying to plan my year out, which like normally is something I've never done that before, but now I feel like I'm getting at a point in my career where I have to sort of take a little bit more of a macro approach to things. But really just like I'm really starting to like dive hardcore into like the long form content. I'm trying to just be more organized, honestly. Like that's something that I'm like my goal for the year is just to like be a lot more consistent and stuff. And as far as like things that are coming down like the pipe, I have a few cool things that are potentially on the horizon that aren't locked in yet, so I don't want to pre-plug them. But it could be a cool year for me if things go the way that I hope that they do.
I hope they do too, and maybe I'll have you come back on the show once that does happen, and be like you can share what happened there. Just kind of, I'm gonna plug myself again right here with the whole knowledge management thing because you mentioned the macro, and that's what kind of got my idea. So I actually created a system for this where I have these different layers. You have the yearly, which is the supra. Then you have macro, which is quarterly. Meso, which is basically monthly. Then down to weekly and daily. And essentially going to that whole macro to micro view like you were talking about. And that's what the system's all based around for this tool. And I've used it in other tools as well.
That's really cool, actually, because like I really like psychotically like planning out like my day, even though like sometimes I don't like follow it, you know. But like if I wake up and I'm like locked in, at most my schedule will be like crazy aggressive where I'll wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, I'll work out, I'll do my Italian class, I'll do research for 2 hours, I'll film 3 TikToks, I'll film long form content, I'll take a break, I'll edit for a while, I'll do some music, and then I'll be like done by like 3 p.m. That's if you catch me on like a productive day. The rest of the time, I'm just sort of like chaotically like floating around and then being like, oh my God,
gotta do this.
It's Tuesday. And then being like, holy shit, I have like 5 things to do. Wait, I'm flying somewhere tomorrow. Oh my God. Oh, no. And like, yeah, you know,
it definitely helps when you have, it definitely helps when you have a little bit more consistency to things. I'm struggling too. Like I can't say that like, oh, because I have a system, I'm completely normal. Like, no, it's just one of those things where having something to rely on. Like I like having, like you said, there's a lot of things I want to get out in the world. Like you said something about that earlier, and I resonated with that because there's a lot of ideas that I just want to share. I needed to have a list where I could put them all down and then prioritize the next 12 that I want to do. And then when I'm ready to make a blog post, boom, there's the next one. Boom, there's the next video. Boom, there's the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's where I gotta lock in. I gotta lock in, bro.
I think that's a good point to wrap up there. I got Daisy Foko, and I'm Dustin PolyInnovator on PolyTools Creator Spotlight. Thank you for joining me, Daisy.
Thank you for having me, Dustin. I would definitely come back on.
I love it.